Welcome back to Community Conversations. I'm your host, Steve Mantis, and my guests today are two profs from Lakehead University, Dr. Shander Shahi and Steve Jobbett. Welcome back, gentlemen.
Thank you.
So I'm all excited and interested here. You were talking earlier about the work you were doing in India up around the Himalayas, the foothills of the highest mountains, on community economic development. And so many of the things resonated with me around some of our communities here in northwestern Ontario. The lack of good water, the depletion of resources. How can we, and what are you doing, or the research team, to help transfer some of that knowledge and engage with folks here locally so that we can learn from each other?
See, this is really important here, because the kind of work now I am doing with the communities, and some of those communities are also facing the same issues that the communities are facing in India, but in a different context. Let's say there are so many remote communities here which are not even connected to the road here. Now the only source of their energy is by flying diesel to those communities, and the diesel is flown in the summer months, or in the winter it goes through ice roads. Now there are so many issues with that. There are so many environmental issues related to that, and it is very, very expensive actually to fly diesel and then power those communities. How much of economic development is taking place through that diesel energy? It's a really big question. How do we make it sustainable? How do we make those communities sustainable? So all the issues of poverty, healthcare, education and all that are related to these issues. Now we are working on a project. We are working with a number of communities which are off-road communities and which are fly-in communities actually, and we are trying to see whether it is feasible to replace some of that diesel energy with other renewable energy sources. And my area actually is, since I am in the natural resources management, so I am trying to see whether it can be replaced by biomass. Do they have enough biomass? So my students are actually working at present. Our whole team is working on to look into the economic feasibility of biomass resources, and Confederation College is also a part of this research that we are doing. And what we are looking into is, first of all, is there enough resource, and is it sustainable to do this, and how can we bring in technology to make it sustainable? Do we need to use the resource as it is? Do we need to convert the resource into wood pellets? Do we need to convert the resource into some kind of a fuel? And all those kinds of things, and we are not coming from outside to tell them about all these things. We hold conversations with them. We ask them about their experience. We ask them about the knowledge they are carrying about all the resource, because they are the people who have all that knowledge. It is just a question of putting that knowledge in the proper context of economic development. Now once this discussion starts and they have the confidence in us, and then we start talking about more economic development opportunities. Their kids going to school, and maybe some of the kids coming to the university for undergraduate degrees. If not, at least to the Confederation College and transferring them to the university. That's what we have done in the past, and we have successfully done it in the last 4 or 5 years. We have got so many kids from those communities either coming to college or to the university. It is sometimes a struggle for them, but we try to help them through the process.
So this is really a long-term strategy we're talking about to engage with folks in the community, build the capacity through the people to really deliver and create a new future.
Exactly, that's what it is.
So Steve, how does the work you're doing in terms of history and Eastern Europe and the austerity agenda fit into this overall theme?
And my work comes out of research I've been doing with communities in Hungary, especially on the radical right, who are talking about issues of sustainability and anti-austerity, but how do they push back against what's been happening in terms of the selling off of public assets, cuts to education and healthcare. And what's fascinating in Hungary, the country that I'm looking at, is that all this sort of radical energy, this very critical energy, is going to the right. In Portugal, the opposite is happening. Another case study I'm looking at, all that energy is going to the left, in large part because Portugal had a history of fascism, and so right-wing politics is not a viable way of channeling this energy, and whereas in Hungary, because of communism, there's no viable left. But what's quite interesting about these two cases is that their critique of the immediate situation is remarkably similar. And in looking at these two cases, it's not so much about what building something that wasn't there before. It's about retrieving and reclaiming public spaces that have been built up over the course of the 20th century, and now in the age of austerity, with these cuts to the public good, cuts to education, healthcare, and so forth, that they're losing, right? So it's a different kind of politics that I'm looking at, a different kind of activism. A lot of the research that I'm doing, the research questions that I'm coming at from an academic point of view, are also grounded in the experiences I had when I was teaching in California as part of working with student activists and community activists, in particular around the Occupy movement, and our attempts to reimagine and rethink community in an age of austerity, which is hitting us here as well. And we have a lot to learn about in terms of the possibility, right, of reimagining and rethinking community in new ways. How do we rethink education in an age of massive cuts to public education? How do we fight back, or how do we organize outside of existing institutional structures? The challenges that have been that the activists that I've been working with and studying, those challenges teach us a lot about what's possible, the pitfalls, and the ways in which a critique of what's happening can go in radically different directions. So the radical right in Hungary, the revolutionary radical left in Portugal have exactly the same critique of globalization, neoliberalism, right? Their politics are radically different. And we have to be thinking not only about the critique as activists, of people engaged in the community, not just about the critique and our analysis of what's happening, but ways of capturing the hearts and minds, the critical imagination of people to rethink communities, because it can go in radically different directions, and we need to be very conscious of that. So this work that I've been doing in Hungary and Portugal, putting it into a global perspective, I can then bring to people in students in our university, to people in our research group, because it's not enough just to think about sustainability. It's the social politics around this, and the moral politics around this as well. Like, what kind of communities do we want to build? Because the radical right people that I've been looking at in Hungary, they're building community gardens. They're also thinking about sustainability. They're moving off grid. They don't drive cars as much as possible. They ride their bikes. They raise their families in not communes, but in a collective way, because the schools are failing them, right? So they're rethinking community in radical ways that look very similar to the way that the left is doing this in Portugal. And for myself, someone who would like to see us move in more international directions and more universal directions, and not a radical nationalist way, I think there's a lot to be learned by these comparative situations.
It's so interesting. As a grandfather, the first thing I thought of is, it's like teenagers. It's like the society is rebelling against the old. You know, in Hungary, rebelling against the left, so they go right. In Portugal, rebelling against the right and going left, asserting their own piece. We're going to come back to this, but we need to take a short break. Please stay with us. We'll be right back.